USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Week in Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to Weekend Review for Monday, December 16th, 2019. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. And Jim, as you noted in USCHO's Monday 10 this week, it was a light schedule, but a lot of stuff going on. And why don't we start out with the game of the week? And it was a two-game series, Notre Dame hosting Penn State. And going into it, you had to think it was going to be a tough one for Notre Dame. Here is Notre Dame coming in on a 5-game losing streak, and a tie started that out, so 6 games winless. And near the bottom in penalty kill against the number 2 power play and the top scoring team in the country. We saw how quickly and dangerously Penn State could play on Friday night in their 4-2 victory. But it was a different story on Saturday, which was the game of the week.
Yeah, you know, we talked to Guy Gadowski a little bit about this last week, and sometimes the most difficult opponent is the desperate opponent. And I think that Notre Dame, the way I saw the series, that they looked like they played very desperate hockey both nights, and they easily could have won Friday's game. That's a game that they held a 1-goal lead in the third period, 2-1, and then during a little bit of a scramble, not only did they give up a goal that tied the game, but they also took a penalty, and Penn State scored in the ensuing power play. As you mentioned, that power play is as strong as they get. And then an empty net goal, and that was all she wrote. But the bounce back on Saturday didn't surprise me at all. I expected it. If you're now your back's against the wall, you've lost 6 in a row, 7 games without a win. This is your last game before your break. If you don't play with the ultimate desperation, then that's kind of sending a message to your coach about what type of a team you are. And not only did they come out and play strong, they got a shutout. And we had mentioned over the last couple of weeks, Cale Morris, who's usually been such a stalwart in net, Mike Richter Award winner a couple of years ago. He was the guy who probably stepped up the most and had a great night in net, frustrated Penn State. And as we've seen it, it's funny. Penn State doesn't have a lot of losses on their schedule, but they've been shut out so many times in losses. And it feels like when their offense gets a little bit of frustration, and that's kind of the worst feeling that can set in for them. And that was what Notre Dame was able to do on Saturday night. They pull out the weekend split. And most importantly, though, you're going on this break. I'm not even sure how many days it is, somewhere between 14 and 21 days for them. And they can at least go in with the understanding that they're a good hockey team, because we knew that coming out of the gates when they came out, a house of fire to start the season. We knew how good Notre Dame was. They've obviously slipped up, but to get that last win and to play really good hockey over the 2 nights. Yes, there was some things you could fault in that third period on Friday, but they played a very good hockey game. And I think, when you're Jeff Jackson, that's really what you're looking for. Moral victories don't go far, but maybe a decent effort and then an actual victory that can go a long way with your team.
Third time that Penn State has been shut out this season. 9th career shutout for Cale Morris, but his first this season. I think his play this weekend, especially in the shutout on Saturday, is key for Notre Dame going forward. And the other good thing about the Saturday game for Notre Dame is Notre Dame was able to slow things down a bit and play their style of game. Morris still had to make 37 saves, but below 40 shots on goal is kind of keeping the damper on Penn State the way that they put shots on net.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think that was important for Jeff Jackson and his team, was to dictate the play. And they started to do that. I thought they did that at times on Friday night. I actually thought that they had slowed the game down a little bit in the second period on Friday, and they looked better than decent, and things seem to be going their way. Then they score early in the third, and you're saying, oh, well, hey, maybe this is Notre Dame's night, and hey, they're going to end the streak. And then Penn State finally got to play their game midway through that period, and that shows how dangerous Penn State can be. And we've seen some teams slow them down. You think of Lowell a few weeks ago, and that game got to overtime, but Lowell found a way to win. And you also go to this game here. If you can slow this team down a little bit, that's really where you find the success. And that takes a lot, though. You've got to play some heavy hockey. You can't get caught out of position, certainly, but you've got to play a little bit of a physical sense against a Penn State team that likes to fly.
Well, let's look at another great series over the weekend, and put an end to a 10-game winning streak for Minnesota State on Saturday as they lost 4-1. That dropped Minnesota State to third in the pairwise, and I can speak with pretty good confidence that in the poll that comes out later today, the new number one is going to be North Dakota because of that. But, you shouldn't take too much away from Minnesota State on this, I don't think. You're going to have some stumbles here and there, and it's a good Northern Michigan team.
Yeah, we've talked about Northern Michigan a few times this year. I mean, they probably deserve a spot in the poll themselves this week. They've had a good season to date. Yes, there's been some blemishes, and they haven't played. I was going back trying to figure how many wins they had against top 20 teams, and I think they had a win against Arizona State when Arizona State was ranked 20th. But other than that, those two games they played against Arizona State and the two games they played against number one Minnesota State this weekend, that's all of the games that they've played against nationally ranked opponents. So I'm not sure that we totally have the measuring stick on Northern, but I think getting that win on Saturday night and bouncing back from a loss on Friday that probably frustrated them at home a little bit. They generate a great atmosphere up there. And you get that, and you get a little bit of momentum. They got a 2-1 lead. And I thought one of the most important things was once they brought a 2-1 lead into the third period, they allowed just 4 shots on goal. So they stifled the Minnesota State offense, if my memory is correct. So that's another big sign that you can hold a team down when they're desperate and hungry.
Yeah, and that's a good thing for any team to be able to do, to get a lead and to be able to really just play some shutdown hockey. And that's the kind of thing that pays off well in the playoffs. And when you have that opportunity and you're able to do it, it speaks well for your program. Well, let's take a look at our next game on our roster, our next weekend series. It was the first half of the Gold Pan series, the battle for the Gold Pan between Denver and Colorado College every season. They play 4 times this year in NCHC play. And Denver, coming off a difficult weekend before against Arizona State, is in good shape for the Gold Pan. They just need a tie going forward as they swept both halves of a home-and-home against Colorado College.
That probably feels pretty good because my memory is that Colorado College took that series last year, and that this year's Colorado College team, in my opinion, is actually better than last year's team was, and this year's Denver team is probably about equal to what last year's team was. So I'm sure for David Carl, the ability to take those 2 wins, put them in the memory bank now, and they won't play one another until the final weekend of the regular season. So they won't see each other again until March. So that will be a solid foundation on which to build the second half. And like you said, it gets them back in a good light. Not that Arizona State and losing and tying a game down there was a bad thing. That's a very good opponent. We know they are. And it's a tough place to play. They played at Oceanside on Friday night down there, and that's a very difficult place to play. So I just think that Denver wanted that confidence boost, and they came out and certainly played solid both nights, and that's what you like to see. And now they're going to go on the break, and hopefully the confidence is there. Now, Colorado College, they're on the other side of this. They, at times this season, have looked very good, but they kind of stumble into the break here. And that's where I think, Mike Havlin wants to get his team back on track. He'll have to do that when they get back. But they're a team that that they've got more talent than they've probably ever had under Haviland. This is a good team. They should be producing a little bit. And like I said, just stumbling toward the break here a little bit.
Let's stay on conference play, as there was one other series of note that we previewed earlier in the week, and that is Army and Robert Morris. Army stayed hot. They took 5 of 6 points from Robert Morris. Trevin Kozlowski got his first career shutout on Saturday, only gave up 1 goal on Sunday, and Army is jumped into first place in Atlantic hockey. Sacred Heart's just a point back, but they've got a couple of games in hand. But this is an Army team that last year was just riddled with injury, especially from the semester break onward. They're healthy, and they are playing very well.
Yeah, I mean, they've had a fantastic last month. Since November 15th, my count, I think 8-2-1. That's a fantastic record, and they've used that. Most of that, all of that is league play. So they've used that to really boost their standing within the league. And we always say it, once you get those points, you can't take them back. So now teams are now chasing Army, and that's a good thing. Even if you get a Sacred Heart team that has some games in hand, and that'll be a great battle, I think, down the stretch. But you got to think they also allowed just one goal against Robert Morris this weekend, and that includes a 5-minute 5-on-5 overtime, the 5-minute 3-on-3 overtime, and I believe they didn't allow a single goal in the shootout. Just one goal scored in the shootout. So that's pretty good. Those are good numbers, and that means this defense is kind of cranking right now, and they're having a lot of success. And you mentioned Kozlowski's first shutout, and he's been close so many times. A lot of one goal against games this year. So it's nice to see him get that shutout, and to do it, at Robert Morris, a building that we know is very difficult to play against a good team. That's a big statement weekend for Army.
I'm going to throw in one other from Atlantic hockey just because it is of broad interest. On Saturday, nothing tie between AIC and Niagara in regulation. They go into the 5-minute overtime. 2 seconds left in 5-on-5. AIC takes a 5-minute major. So virtually the entire 3-on-3 was 4-on-3 for Niagara. Still no score. It was a shootout win for the extra point for Niagara. That sounds like an old school ECAC game. Nothing.
It's always one of the things that our site is that when the scoreboard page is showing it doesn't show any numbers sometimes. When it's 0-0, and I get so confused. And I'm like, wait, nobody scored a goal in the whole game, and you just don't see a lot of these scoreless ties. And I know there's been a few. Maybe this might be the second one this year. There's been a few over the last few seasons, but you're now adding so many mechanisms to score. At least 3-on-3 when you're getting 4-on-3 for the entire 5 minutes. You would think that you'd find a way to put a puck in the net, but credit to AIC for at least not losing there, but I guess it doesn't matter. They still lost in the shootout, so that's almost the same thing when you're with this new convoluted score, standing system that confuses me more and more every day. But yeah, crazy. I saw that score on Saturday, and I tried to, kind of get my mind to wrap around what had happened in that game.
Well, there's a whole bunch of non-conference play that happened over the weekend. We'll get to that in a moment. First, a word from our sponsor, the NCAA Frozen Four, coming up April 9th and 11th in Detroit, Michigan.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Every time you show up, every time you make your presence heard, whether you clap your hands or stomp your feet, lead the chant or join the chorus. However you choose to be a fan, you make the game. The NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th at Little Caesars Arena in Detroit. Visit ncaa.com/Frozen4 to get your tickets today.
We continue with Weekend Review from USCHO.com. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Jim, a wild one for Northeastern, a single game. Northeastern scored 3 goals in the first period. Dartmouth, the Big Green, come back to tie it in the second. And then Northeastern, 3 more goals in the second half of the second, and ended up 6-4, not what you would call a goalie duel. And I know the always entertaining Dartmouth Twitter account was fun to watch on that one too.
I'm sure it was, but what a crazy back and forth, and listening to Jim Madigan after the game, not happy with what happened early in the second period where you have a 3-goal lead and you blow it. But then he sits back and says, hey, you know what, we still came back, and in the second half of the period they were gangbusters again, and they were rolling, and they're getting goals, and that's wonderful when you're getting goals, and they're getting them from a lot of different lines, some back end scoring. Now this is a team a lot of people thought, where are they going to generate their offense from, but they're finding a lot of players. I mean, obviously Tyler Madden is the guy that you're always looking for, but nobody really thought about Aiden McDonough coming into the season. He has 2 goals and 2 assists in that game, and Ryan Shea's getting his offense going, and I just think that this is a very dangerous Northeastern team. When they come out in the second half, as long as they stay healthy, this is going to be a team that they're going to score goals. You're going to have to slow them down. I think that they've got a decent goaltender in Craig Pantano too, and we'll see as his play has to go over the second half, but I like Northeastern. This is a dangerous team, and just going to the other side, Dartmouth. Here they were, in a position, for the second consecutive week where they could have upset a nationally ranked team last week. Of course, giving Cornell their first loss, but they're plucky and they're tough to play against, and they score goals in bunches, and that can be a problem. I think they'll be a very tough team in the ECAC in the second half as well.
Well, in hockey, when there's a 5-minute major, you score, you continue to get power plays. Yet we don't usually see teams rack up a lot of goals on that for whatever reason. Maybe a lack of urgency, or maybe really good penalty kill against them motivated teams to kill off the penalty. But that wasn't the case on Saturday. After a 2-2 tie with Michigan Tech at Michigan Tech on Friday, Clarkson had 3 power play goals in less than a minute during a major penalty on Michigan Tech, and ended up with 3 of 4 points from Tech on the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, that was explosive. And it was kind of one of those strange power play too, because the 5-minute major came with a 2-minute penalty against Clarkson. So you ended up having a 3-minute major power play. So they had to kind of play 4-on-4 hockey. Neither team scored in that. But then once Clarkson got on the power play, it just started, exploding. And 3 quick goals. They were down 2-0 in that game. That turned the game around. They score another power play goal in the third period. Finished the night 4 for 8 on the power play. That always helps your special team stats. They didn't need a lot of help. They've got a very good power play. But good. That's a good road win. That's a very good weekend for Clarkson to go out there, and we know how tough Michigan Tech has been playing teams of late. You end up taking 3 or 4 points, you get a win and a tie, and you're basically holding your position in the pairwise, which I think that is what they wanted to do when you really look at what this weekend was all about.
Well, there's another interesting series between Arizona State and Michigan State. It was in East Lansing with the Spartans hosting the Sun Devils. Both teams also kind of maintained position in the pairwise. And it was a good statement weekend, I think, for both teams. Arizona State proving the naysayers from earlier in the season wrong, I suppose. And then Michigan State, which has been strong right along, showing that they're not to be overlooked and that they've got a pretty good program there.
Yeah, certainly. Good win on Friday for Arizona State. And then you get into one of these situations, another 0-0 tie, basically, through regulation. Then Michigan State finds a way to get that winning goal. And both of those programs needed that. Arizona State, they've been playing good hockey since they came back from their 19-day break in the early November. They go on the road in these series, and they've got to find a way to at least get splits against the good teams, and hopefully take 3 or 4 sweep teams in the series against teams that maybe aren't the biggest help to their RPI. And you get that split. Michigan State, I think you've got them in the Big Ten, and they've got some decent enough teams in there. Even though I think those teams are beating each other up a little bit this year, that game still helped the RPI for. Even losing one of the 2 games, that helped the RPI for Arizona State. And that's what it's all about. And you've got to win your home games. You've got to go find a way to be about 666 on the road, maybe even a little below that. And I think Arizona State's always going to be an NCAA tournament team if they follow that formula.
And they're going to have to get some good victories coming up as they get into January. They're going to face a number of teams in Atlantic hockey, some of the better teams in that conference, but with the overall winning percentage in that league, the lowest among the 6 leagues, Arizona State is going to need to make that up in the win-loss column.
Yeah, that's for sure. They're going to have to win those games. And then before they even get there, they're going to have to play 2 against Omaha this week and then 2 against Harvard the following week. And those Harvard games are neutral site games. They're being played in California, but they're supposed to kind of be home games because of the fan base that Arizona State has out there. They expect to be able to sell out this arena, which I think holds between 3,000 and 4,000 fans. So those are 4 games leading into January that are going to be pretty important for them as well.
Well, some sad news came out on Saturday night, Jim, as word got around fairly quickly that evening that legendary Minnesota head coach Doug Woog passed away at the age of 75. Now, it was sadness that was tempered by smiles as people remembered what a sweet guy Doug Woog was. He grew up playing for St. Paul High School, played 3 seasons for the Gophers, served as their captain, was their head coach from 85 through the late 90s, and a guy who stuck around the program on TV and was always present around the press room and around the arenas at things like the Frozen Four. I didn't get to know Doug very well, but my interactions with him really bore out what people said about him, about being a congenial, positive, happy guy.
Yeah, it's truly a loss. He was a good ambassador for the Minnesota program. And, I think that we hadn't seen his face around in the last few years. And, I don't usually start speculating at that point. People just sometimes, get tired of doing things. But he was a man that when you saw him around, he was a personality, and that's what made him successful in his television days afterwards. I didn't really have a lot of interactions with him being out on the East Coast, but there's one story I remember from the 2001 regional. Minnesota was playing Maine, and Maine, it was a little bit of a down year. Minnesota was a good year, but they didn't get a bye. That's what I remember. And they played each other in the first round back when there was only a 12-team tournament. And it was one of the first NCAA events I had covered. I had only been a journalist for a couple of years, and I was sitting 2 seats over from the replay official, who happened to be Greg Shepard, who was a WCHA, I believe, the head of officials at that time. And Doug obviously knew him, so Doug slides into the seat between us, and all is fine. They're just having a nice conversation. I'm not really listening. But then there was a play that had to be reviewed, and the TV camera, this was back in the day when the video review official was literally sitting amongst the media, amongst the fans. Fans were a row behind us, and I could hear somebody's walkie-talkie as soon as the TV camera panned over to where they were sitting, saying, "Hey, get Woog out of there. People are gonna think he's trying to influence the call." So that's what he would never do, because he was just such a gentleman. But, he was just such a friendly man, and all he wanted to do. And he reminded me a lot of so many of the other coaches out there, especially like Jeff Sauer. And I think the two of them, from what I'm told, were pretty good friends. They just love to talk hockey. And they eat, slept, and breathed hockey, and a man that likes to talk hockey that much is going to be a friend to anybody in this business. We know that. So he'll be missed, and I'm glad he was so well memorialized. Frank Mazzacco, who was his longtime broadcast partner, calling those Gopher games on television, he just posted something on Twitter, and it turned into almost a flood of responses with everybody who had a great Doug Woog story to tell. And Frank was just enjoying them and encouraging more. And those are the types of moments, I think when I pass, I hope somebody will want to say one nice thing about me, not hundreds. So that's obviously the man that Doug Woog was, and the success he had there. I think he always wanted to win that national title, and he didn't, but he had a lot of success there. I think it was 12 straight NCAA tournaments, 6 Frozen Fours. Countless regular season, postseason tournaments in the WCHA. So life well lived, Doug Woog. Rest in peace, and our thoughts to his family and obviously the entire Minnesota hockey community.
One last comment. You mentioned about having the replay right there in press row. Man, have things changed. We get to talk to some of the people with the NCAA who handle that, but that's usually locked away in a separate booth in the arena. It's not like armed guards or a Brinks truck, but it's pretty close.
Yeah, that has changed a lot. Even in arenas that don't have a way to facilitate it. I think I was in Providence last year, and those guys were down in the bowels of the arena, trying to move video and look at plays and, talk to the officials on the ice. It has changed a lot.
Well, that's going to do it for Weekend Review for this week. We'd like to thank our sponsor, the NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Detroit, Michigan. ncaa.com/frozen4 for more information. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast, a production of US College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.